Hi, everybody, welcome. You should be here for ENT 321. If you're not, I apologize, because it might be a long walk to the other sessions. Today, we're going to talk about refactor spaces. We're super excited. Last night and this morning, we finished our launch of a new capability that's inside Migration Hub called Refactor Spaces, which we hope will help you refactor with a little bit less hurdles than you may have tried building something yourself. So let's talk a little bit about refactor spaces. My name is Belinda Quick. I'm a product manager with the team. I'll be joined on stage here in a little bit by Mike Sicenti, another product manager on our team, and Jonah Jones, one of our solution architects. Today, we hope to talk to you a little bit about what is business agility on AWS? What does it look like, and why are you using AWS to help you with your business agility? We'll talk about how do you refactor to microservices, what is some of the best practices we've seen from other customers and from other solutions that are out there, and what we think is the best thing for our customers to do, and what we've heard from them are their pain points. Then we're going to introduce our new service, Accelerating with AWS Migration Hub Refactor Spaces. We're very excited about this. And then we're going to do a little bit of a demo of our new service as well. And of course, we'll leave some time for Q&A, so stock up those questions. Mike would love to answer anything you have to ask. All right, so why do we maximize your business agility with AWS? When folks migrate to AWS, a lot of their first concerns and considerations are around cost savings. It's a lot of the big momentum to go to the cloud. But what we've actually seen from thousands of migrations that have happened on AWS is that there's further and more incremental cost savings as you scale with AWS, where you start taking advantage of performance capabilities and business agility. And we're going to double click on that business agility today and talk a little bit more about what that looks like using our services. We know that there are many applications in enterprise portfolios that may be considered monoliths. Monoliths to us aren't just mainframe applications that have sat there for 25 years. They're not just old coded applications where maybe 5 developers prior to you sitting on the application development team may have worked on it. It's something that has some tight coupling in it, and that it can only be released as a package whole. You can't release different portions or functions of it separately. We call that a monolith. When we think about monoliths, though, we understand that there's a lot of challenges that come with them. There's the human factor of people that have left and may not have left all of the business logic and notes about their code. There's also some things that cause your business to have slow product innovation. They have this giant application that they have to circle around with new features to meet your customer demands. There's decreased time to market when you have to release an entire package versus just one function. And there's different boundaries that may happen with team ownership. You've got different teams working on a very large instance that may not have all the same ownership principles as you do, trying to meet that latest business requirement or that latest business innovation. We know the technical challenges, right? There's that high coupling and low cohesion issues. There's difficulties when there's infrequent deployments. Sometimes when they're monoliths, there's brittle applications, they're hard to understand. And when we look at the value and the promise of that business agility with cloud capabilities, this is where monoliths provide the biggest challenge, is they don't allow you to do that rapid experimentation. We know with AWS migration capabilities, we like to call them the 7 R's of migration. We know that you have some options as you look at retiring these monoliths. What should you do? How should you approach them? You can either retire them completely, you can retain them, maybe you'll relocate them onto some cheaper infrastructure, or maybe you'll rehost it completely. There's some times where you're going to look at a commoditized solution that may replace your application, and that's really where that repurchase may come in handy. Or you're going to re-platform it. Maybe you'll re-platform it to AWS. But it's really the highest value proposition when you get that chance to break down that monolith and refactor it completely. You get to break apart that business functionality and take true advantage of all of the capabilities that the AWS cloud has to offer for you. That sounds really great, right? Just migrate and you're done. But we know it's hard. It takes a long time. We see customers that stall out on some of their migrations because there's a lot of challenges when you're addressing these large monoliths or even small monoliths. Sometimes it's very expensive and you're trying to get that business case conversation happening with your leadership. It's hard to explain, but seriously, it'll get cheaper later when you really have to realize benefits soon. And when you don't have all of the AWS knowledge to get started, it becomes challenging, where you may have to change how your organization is structured first to truly take advantage of the cloud capabilities. The first law of holes, and I love this, my coworker Nat says it all the time, is stop digging. If you find yourself in a hole, stop digging further. If you find yourself with a monolith, the first rule should be stop adding on to it. See what you can do to experiment around it. And why should you refactor? Let's talk a little bit more about that. When you refactor, you're taking that monolith and you're breaking it into new capabilities. You're reducing its deployment blast radius. Instead of deploying that monolith as a whole, you're going to be using microservices to release specified functions and capabilities rather than an entire application. With that, you're getting that functional autonomy and single responsibility capabilities built in. You're going to look at your increased deployment velocity merely because you're not deploying a large application anymore, you're deploying a microservice. It's a lot faster to deploy. And with that, you really can gain and garner the power of the cloud by getting that focused scalability. You're not increasing your entire infrastructure to meet the demands of one component of that application. You're only focusing on one of those scale points that you need. You know, we look at a lot of different customers and had a lot of different conversations with them before we brought this solution to our development teams to start building out the service. And a lot of what they told us is that our application costs too much when it's on AWS. As we had that traffic flow with all of our new capabilities on it, we weren't able to scale and take the advantage of all of the cost capabilities that scaling on the cloud could provide, because we had to scale that whole application versus just that one microservice. When you start thinking about transforming your business and applications, you're also transforming the way people work, right? So we all like to think about Conway's Law, right? Communication is a reflection of your IT capabilities as well. And when you think about how you design your new refactored capabilities, you have to think about how you're going to work and develop around them as well. You have some decomposition options. You've got a very large monolith application here, and I say large, and that's in the eye of the beholder, I understand that. But when you think about decomposing your monolith, you have different options to do this. When you read up on decomposition, you can look at, should I do it by auxiliary services? Should I do it by business capability? Should I look at it at a transactional level? Should I organize it around my current org chart? This team does that, that team does this. Or should I look at the business subdomain? What we found as a best practice is looking at that business subdomain as a really good starting place. When you start thinking about those business domains, you're not bound by the org charts that you live in your enterprise. You're bound by the value that this application will give to your customers, those business capabilities that they're interacting with. You can use event storming to understand and how to look at how you divide up your monolith by those business subdomains as well. When we see our customers doing that, we see them getting to that scale point where they're able to accelerate faster. And we know that there's some patterns to this. Martin Fowler is one of the folks that we like to quote a lot, and he introduced us to the concept of the strangler fig tree. If you haven't had time to look up the images of a strangler fig tree, it's actually really cool looking. It's a fig tree that grows around a tree, and it incrementally strangles it over time and takes hold of the light and the air with its leaves. When you look at taking that approach to your technology and your monolith applications, you don't have to do that big bang change. You don't have to put all of your business risk on releasing to multiple microservices all at once. You can release one at a time. You can start strangling that monolith one microservice at a time, and that gives you that agility. You're now focusing your team and your effort on those high-value conversations with technology, where they're able to take that monolith and address a new customer demand a lot faster, and you'll be able to prioritize those capabilities. With that agility and frequent releases, you're now looking at lower risk. You're not actually risking the impact of the entire business logic that's been wrapped up in that monolith for years. You're now actually only looking at one microservice at a time. And there's a lot of immediate benefits with that, right? You can start iterating quickly on that microservice, and you're not bound by the time that it takes to release that entire application as a whole. And you have easier rollback. When you think about experimentation, you have to think about the opportunity to roll back as well. Maybe that experiment didn't work and you want to roll back to a different version, or you want to do some A/B testing. This allows you to do it a little bit faster than that entire monolith as a whole. At AWS, we recommend that you refactor incrementally. When you use the strangler fig pattern to achieve this, you're also achieving that team independence that goes with it. You're addressing one of those other pain points of the teams that are involved with building your microservices. When you define the interface as the first piece to be refactored, and then you can implement and test the new capability, you can start redirecting from that old application, the old monolith, over to the new microservices. And you're just rerouting. Once you've actually strangled the monolith, which is a kind of a horrible metaphor here, but when you look at that monolith and you've reduced all of its functionality and refactored it into its true microservices, now you have the opportunity to delete that old code. That retiring of tech debt, that was that value promise that we thought about so long ago. Now you have the chance to do that for that large monolith application as you're starting to use your microservices instead. And this gives you the most important business value point, which is that you're able to launch a new feature fast. One option isn't to do the full refactor at the get-go. Maybe you're going to do a leave and layer approach. What we mean by leave and layer is that you're actually taking a new piece of functionality, a new piece of business value, and you're going to set it alongside of that monolith. You're going to stop digging. You're going to build that new capability and set it alongside. You know, we've talked to several customers as we built these services, and one of them told us a story about they had a new payment capability they needed to introduce to their business. It was a mobile payment offering. If they had to refactor that into an existing application, it would have taken them 4+ months to actually build it out in the application and another 4+ months to roll it out to all of the users of that application. With the leave and layer approach, they built it, set it alongside, and they left it there as the new capabilities were now in the microservice architecture, and the old monolith stayed as is. It was a leave and layer. They set it right alongside, integrated only where they needed to, which allowed them to do that integration faster. They were able to launch that new capability, and they then were able to expand their business into that new capability set of mobile payments. When we talk about the incremental refactor in AWS, we talk about the quick gains and getting to that maximum business value. Really, a quick gain is just lift and shift. Move your application over to AWS. There's a quick gain in the infrastructure benefits of using AWS. You're going to have to set up your refactor environment. That might not be the highest value piece of the conversation. Right? That's really the low value, the undifferentiated heavy lifting here. But you really want to get to that maximum business value where you're taking and addressing that monolith. That's where you use that leave and layer approach, or you use that incremental refactoring that we talked about with a strangler fig pattern. The other key part of this is at AWS we talk about multiple accounts. And an account to us started out as a financial construct and has moved rapidly into some new capabilities in AWS. When you take advantage of the cloud, you're able to isolate things more effectively, and you can use an account as a resource boundary for that. With a multi-account approach to your application, you can start introducing resource isolation. You can start looking at security isolation. You may have a payment function that sits alongside some other functions. We know that payment function is going to be guarded by some new regulations or old regulations if it's PCI, that you need to look at regulatory boundaries on that, where you don't have to do that for the rest of that whole monolith. You're going to look at security isolation by isolating your policies and control framework in that multi-account framework as well. There's cost and billing clarity. Inside those accounts, you can tag resources in them, and they're encompassed in one account, and the bills come in just specifically for that account, or you can aggregate them to a multi-account whole. You get to choose how that aggregation works. You can reduce your AWS resource limits. As you start using AWS services, we have quotas that are assigned with each of our services, and sometimes within an account, you may reach those limits. So you, by breaking down your monolith into microservices, can address those quotas on a one-off basis versus looking at that application as a whole. It gives you a little bit more of that focus on where those quotas need to be sitting. You can look at your business unit separation, or you can look at your business domain modeling of this, where different accounts can meet different team needs. I worked with a global size customer who was working at different divisions all over the world, and they had a lot of different things considered in their enterprise. And one division had nothing to do with the other side of the globe and the other division. They were developing different products for different consumers, for different markets. By using a multi-account approach, They are able to address their top-down security concerns in a consistent way by still allowing for the benefits of different accounts for them to execute within. The team in East Asia didn't have to operate with the same boundaries and rules as the team in the southeast of the US. They were able to address that business unit separation as they developed different products for different customer sets in a very specific way by using a multi-account strategy. There's a lot of documentation out there on multi-account strategies, benefits for that, and what you can do to set yourself up for success. And we can talk about some of those resources along the way, but you can also find them on our websites. Really, the last benefit here is that multiple development teams. If you remember, we talked a little bit about Conway's Law. You want to make sure you're organizing and creating a development account, an AWS account to match those development team needs so you can hit their velocity. Because the velocity of your development team is going to be the same velocity that you are able to achieve with your business value for your customers, because now you've isolated those functions in microservices. So when we have multiple refactor patterns for application transformation, I'm going to invite my colleague Mike up here to start talking about this. And what we heard from customers was a lot of the pain points we talked about with how can I get to that business agility and that promise of the agility faster. And when we heard all of those concerns, we were able to develop a new solution. And I'm going to do a hot handoff here to Mike, and he's going to walk us through what that looks like.
Thanks, Belinda. Hi,
everybody.
I'm Mike Shosheni. I'm the product manager on Migration Hub Refactor Spaces, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about it tonight. And so what Belinda was talking about is kind of summarized here again on a previous slide with Leave and Layer and Strangler Fig. And so I'm not going to rehash it entirely, but these are the two key strategies for incremental application refactoring. And that's what we wanted to help with and make easier when we launched Refactor Spaces. So we fundamentally changed how you get started with application refactor modernization in AWS. And we've done that with Refactor Spaces. We've simplified development and operations while the application's being refactored. And with the launch of Migration Hub Refactor Spaces, we've eliminated some of the most time-consuming design and implementation steps to set up a best practices-based multi-account refactor environment. And once set up, we've simplified incrementally moving pieces of an existing application to new microservices that are maintained independently. And previously, you might have spent months just determining how you would grow and evolve the existing application across multiple AWS accounts and microservices. And this would be a time-consuming process where we heard from customers that you would have to architect how your legacy app and your new microservices, how would they communicate directly across AWS accounts? And then you would need to go implement that infrastructure to make that happen. And that was shown in the slide with the three pieces where the lower value was that undifferentiated heavy lifting. And so now, with Migration Hub Refactor Spaces, you can provision a multi-account refactor environment in minutes. And it provides a cross-account network bridge for existing applications and new microservices to talk directly across AWS accounts. And so once an application is in a Refactor Spaces environment, we also provide you a unified view of the application and your new microservices using a Strangler Fig proxy. And the proxy lets you incrementally route traffic away from the old application to your new microservices without needing to learn and manage the complexities of multi-account routing and networking. And so using Refactor Spaces, you can quickly add new capabilities in microservices without touching your existing application. That's that leave and layer approach. Or you can accelerate the time, and you can accelerate the time to value when refactoring without the additional risk of making changes to the legacy or monolithic app. And so your teams stay independent, and evolving applications is faster. And so we know your business needs shift over time. And so we offer the ability to quickly innovate and adjust how you're doing your refactor. And so you choose the starting point. You can start with leave and layer, and then move into a partial app transformation, where you'll operate the old and new together for some period of time. And then eventually you'll get to eliminate, where in the end, this is often the ultimate goal, you'll shut down that monolith in the end, and it'll be replaced by new independent microservices. And regardless of which approach you choose or what's right for your business, Refactor Spaces can help accelerate doing that in AWS. And so there's 4 primary benefits to incrementally refactoring in AWS. And using this orchestration service that we launched today, you can reduce the time to set up and manage a refactor environment. You can shield your application consumers from as you update and change the infrastructure. It allows you to seamlessly reroute traffic from the old to the new without your users knowing, and doing it across multiple AWS accounts. And finally, we do the undifferentiated heavy lifting of setting up the right refactor environment for you. And so all of these allow you to start refactoring in days instead of months. And so, sorry, it skipped ahead. So Refactor Spaces solves a common set of problems, setting up that infrastructure for refactor, rewrite, and re-architecting applications, realizing value early during an application refactor. And with Refactor Spaces, experimenting is easier. And so that's how you can realize value earlier, especially with Leave and Layer. And finally, operating your applications while they're changing in AWS is easier. And so it does this by orchestrating other AWS services inside of your accounts. The first thing we orchestrate is a refactor environment using Transit Gateway, Resource Access Manager, and VPCs to bridge networking across AWS accounts. And this allows your old application and your new services to communicate directly across AWS accounts without having to stand up the network infrastructure yourself. And so isolating your legacy application and your new microservices at the account level is designed to support the team independence that you're seeking when you're going to microservices that Belinda was talking about earlier. And it gives you a mechanism, a way to ensure that you have independent deployment and technology choices across your accounts. So we just showed the benefits of using multiple accounts, and one of them was team independence, and we're making it easier to achieve that. And so the second piece that we orchestrate is the application proxy. And this is a simplification of the strangler fig pattern in AWS. And so with that, Refactor Spaces orchestrates API gateway, NLB, VPC link, and Lambda resource policies to let you transparently add new services to an external HTTP endpoint, and then incrementally route traffic away from the old application to new services. And the underlying architecture changes are transparent to your app consumers. And that combines to reduce the time and effort for the app refactor, simplify the development and operations while the app's being refactored, and it lets your legacy app and your microservices be combined into a single Refactor Spaces application that has routing, isolation, and centralized management. Yes? That's a great question. I'll talk about it in the context of this next slide, where I'm going to walk through the architecture. Thank you. You teed it up perfectly. Appreciate it. So the question was, is there a way to slowly send traffic, dial-up traffic to the new service instead of having it kind of big bang all at once go? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through a very basic example application refactor with Refactor Spaces, and I'll answer that question in the context here, and we'll have more time too to discuss at the end. And then after I show this architecture walkthrough here, Jonah is going to come up and he's going to show a demo of doing this with Refactor Spaces and what we launched earlier today. So the first thing we need to do is we want to create our first Refactor Spaces refactor environment, and we're going to pick an account that becomes the owner of this environment. The environment's an AWS resource, it has an ARN, and the environment owner is just the person who is the account that owns created that environment. Now that's important because that account, that environment owner, is going to get some cross-account visibility to the other Refactor Spaces resources we add into the environment. And so for every box you see here on this slide, that corresponds to one action in our console, one API call, or CloudFormation resource. We have CloudFormation support today in preview. So once we've created our first refactor environment, Refactor Spaces orchestrates Transit Gateway inside of your account. And so the important note here is that this Transit Gateway is provisioned inside your account. And you can change it if needed. So within a few bounds, this can be customized. And we did that, we built the service with that in mind. We wanted to make sure you maintain control over these resources because we know there's many different ways to refactor applications, and there's many types of applications, and we may not orchestrate all the pieces today, and so we want to make sure you're able to customize it as needed. And so next, we're going to add other accounts to be used for refactoring to the environment. And so here we have 2 accounts in this example. Refactor spaces were not opinionated. You can start with 1 account. You can start with more than 3. 3 is our canonical example and really our recommended starting point. Have an environment owner. You'll probably already have an account for your existing apps, maybe more than 1, and then start with another account to keep your first set of microservices. And what we do here is you use Resource Access Manager, which is an existing AWS service, and you say share the refactor spaces environment with these other accounts. And when you do that, Flux orchestrates Resource Access Manager to share the AWS resources we provisioned with those other accounts. So the transit gateway that's here is now shared with the other 2 accounts I showed. But we haven't actually set up the network bridge yet for that environment or created any services or applications. So that's what we'll do next. So what we need to do now is we'll create an application, and we'll do this in the environment owner's account. And what happens is Refactor Spaces or provisions API Gateway and NLB to allow external HTTP traffic to access Refactor Spaces services inside of this refactor environment. Now, we haven't created any services in the application yet. And so the next thing we need to do is create those services. So from the other accounts, we can call create service, and we'll add, in this particular example, both of the services have URLs that are in VPCs. You can alternatively specify a Lambda. And when you call create service from those accounts, so the teams could be operating independently once it's shared with them, once the environment's shared, what happens is Refactor Spaces is going to bridge traffic between those VPCs that you added. So when I added, you bring your own VPC today, and we orchestrate Transit Gateway and Resource Access Manager to connect, to bridge those VPCs in, and now you have a cross-account network bridge. So resources in those VPCs can now use a Refactor Spaces created security group, and traffic is permitted between any resource that's placed in that and launched in that VPC. So next up, we need to add a route to our application and to a service in it. And the first route that we add is our default route. And so what we'll do here is we'll call create route, we'll specify the service that we created, it's our monolith, and all traffic is now served by the monolith. Now the API gateway that we provisioned is the new front door for your application. And this looks like what the application does today probably. You just have cut over to this new API gateway endpoint. And so fast forward, our first team that first microservice that we wanted to build gets the team picked ALB and Fargate. It can be any AWS compute. It could be serverless or containers. In this case, we chose ALB and Fargate. We test it, we deploy it. And let's say this is a shopping cart microservice. And so we want to send everything under /cart, the path, we're doing path-based routing today, to this microservice. And so you call create route again, and you say send /cart to my new service that I just deployed, and traffic is automatically moved from the monolith to the new service. We orchestrate API Gateway, a feature of API Gateway called VPC Link, and NLB to move the traffic to the new microservice. We ensure that no traffic's lost in during the change of the route and the configuration of those services. And today, this moves all traffic on /cart. Now, we would envision that you would have 3 or 4 instances of this environment. So to the question, you'd probably have dev test prod or dev test gamma prod, depending on what you might call that forest stage. Now, so you would test it in the lower stages. Now, if you want to do traffic weighting, we don't block you from using these resources further. So you can still build on top of this and use the native AWS API Gateway and Lambda, or depending on your compute target, traffic weighting or other canary deployment features. We don't currently orchestrate that, but we don't prevent you from using it. And other AWS services do offer those, depending on which pattern you want to use. So now that traffic is being transparently handled by this new microservice, and app consumers, they didn't know, and you could also fall back. You could delete the route and fall back to the monolith during testing. So you could tie it into your deployment pipelines and test frameworks. And so from an application API standpoint, your application, the availability, latency, and limits for the application itself are all coming from API Gateway, NLB, and Transit Gateway, and Refactor Spaces isn't in the application's critical path. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jonah to show this in action on our console.
Yeah. Test. Yeah, I'd love it if you could stay up here, Michael, too. And as we go through the demo, you can probably talk a little bit more in depth about some of the things that we're actually seeing here. But again, we're going to be walking through, just how you would set this up. I think the demo is about 13 to 15 minutes as we go through, and hopefully we can refactor it in that time, or at least one service. So, yeah. Again, there's no audio from this demo. We're going to be talking over it as we, but let me just pause really fast and just tee it up. So this was our, our shopping service, and like Michael mentioned, we're going to be refactoring one of the services in it, and in this one, we're going to be doing the cart service. So right here, and there's two components to the cart service. There's an add cart, and then there's a get cart. And so using that, we're going to be rewriting these into Lambda, and we're going to be using Refactor Spaces to help handle all the difficult pieces for us. So I'm just showing right now that the shop works with the monolith, so everything's working. Cart shows 2. I added something to the cart, it incremented because it was at 1. So this is just explaining that on our monolith currently everything's working. I have the developer console just kind of showing added to cart is what it says when it's good. Here is a look at our monolith. We have a /unicorns route that is displaying all the unicorns in our store. So this is another piece of functionality here. And now we're going to go into Refactor Spaces. So the first thing, like Michael mentioned, is we're going to create the environment. So we name it Reinvent Unishop. We give it a description, and we hit Create. So what is this creating behind the scenes?
Yeah, so this is where we're provisioning the Transit Gateway when you create the environment, and it's contained within that environment. And that's when you share the Refactor Spaces environment, which we'll do in a second. We're also sharing resources within it using Resource Access Manager on your behalf.
Awesome. So that takes a few minutes because Transit Gateway, spins up. I fast forwarded it for your convenience, hopefully. And so when you're doing the creation, the next thing is it has you create an application. And so what exactly is an application behind the scenes?
So yeah, the app is, this is the Strangler Fig proxy. So here we're going to provision API Gateway and NLB within a VPC. So when you provide the proxy VPC, that's for the NLB that we're going to provision. And we'll also configure on that API Gateway a feature of API Gateway called VPC Link into this NLB, which is what you use to route traffic into VPCs in different accounts. Awesome.
So the next thing is, like Michael mentioned, it says optional for share environment. And so this is where you would add the multiple accounts if you have them. You can also do this in a single account. So that's how I had first started working on it when I was testing this out, is you can also use this on a single account if that's how your company runs. So does this create any other networking in the other account, Michael, when it launches?
Yeah, so you're sharing it here, and so what's going to happen here is you're actually not using, when you share the environment, you're using Resource Access Manager directly. It's a single API call, create resource share. Our console does that for you on your behalf. And when you do that, though, you're sharing a container. You're sharing the Refactor Spaces environment. And so then it will, at that time, share the Transit Gateway using RAM. So Refactor Spaces is going to orchestrate RAM for you, and we'll share it with those other accounts. And the other note here is you can also, because we're using Resource Access Manager, RAM for short, because we're using RAM, you can also easily share with an OU or a whole AWS organization.
Awesome. So one thing to point out here is my first account is going to start with 164. For your convenience, I'm using the white Chrome profile for my main account, and I'm actually going to use a green one when I'm working in the secondary account. So it's a little bit more obvious, which console I'm in between the two accounts here. And so the second account I'm sharing it is a 771, 778 as we go through this demo. Hopefully it makes a little bit more sense as you see the window switching and stuff. So once you select this and share, you hit complete, and it spins up. So everything is successful here. And so we're just taking a look at what information the console is providing. It's got an ARN, the main account owner, healthy, I'm hoping. Our transit gateway, if we want to click on it and check it out. Is there anything Alice, that's worth noting here?
Yeah, I think that this view is important because this is visibility that you wouldn't get today until we had launched Refactor Spaces. So you can see how many services have I created and I'm routing to across multiple accounts and how many accounts are involved. And then on the tabs there on our console, you'll be able to also see what VPCs are bridged in and what's their CIDR blocks. So for that network bridge, you can get a quick glance at what's configured in it. I'm sorry, can you repeat? Oh, absolutely. So the question, can I add other AWS accounts in the future? Yeah, you can add them at any time. So because we're using Resource Access Manager, you can do it from the console, or you would do it via your deployment pipelines using Resource Access Managers, create resource share, and you would share it with that account.
Yep. And so I've done this. That share environment right there is how you can do it after the fact.
Yep. Thank you.
Awesome. So I was just taking a look around here, just showing. So this is the actual application now. So we were just in the environment view. And so we have our proxy, 0 services, 0 routes at the moment. And showing off that we have the share that's associating. And so it's going to say associating because we need to go into our second account, which we just did. We're in the green profile now. And we have a notification. And so this is what the second account sees. So I need to refresh here, and I have an invite from the 164 account. It expires in 12 hours, basically inviting it to be part of this environment. Is there anything that's going on behind the scenes once I hit accept here?
Yeah, so this is, again, where you're dealing with Resource Access Manager here. So the invitation is sent using that, and this is showing your RAM invites for Refactor Spaces environments. It's also worth mentioning that if you're in an AWS organization, you can configure auto accepting of invites if that's something from a convenience standpoint you wanted. I believe you can do that via the org level.
Awesome. And so in the secondary account, one thing to notice is that the owner account ID is now showing my primary account, but I still have the same view that that main account had, right? So I pretty much have the same environment view. I don't know, is there any permissions that are different?
Yeah, so there's certain things you're not going to be able to see from the accounts that don't own the environment. So you won't be able to see all the other VPCs in the environment, and you may not be able, depending on how it's configured from an IAM perspective, you may not be able to see the other services.
Gotcha. Awesome. But you can see some of the important stuff like the application and working in here, which is, if I'm refactoring this application like I am in the demo, I'm just going to be adding my microservices in this green account today. So now that we're here, like Michael mentioned, the first step in refactoring is we're going to add that default route. It's going to be our proxy. So when we created the application, it created this API gateway for us, right?
Yeah, so when we create the app, that's when you get your API gateway, which is the proxy we're using to provide the proxy. And it provisions an API for you. And I think next you're going to dive into the...
Yeah, and so
that's right.
Same name as the application I created, I believe, and it's a REST API. But right now it's pretty bare bones. It just has a /route at the moment. So we're going to go add our default route here. So the first thing we're going to do is we go hit create service. This one is going to be pointing to our EC2 instance, that /unicorns we looked at earlier. And so that's the back end for that front end, that all the pieces we were looking at. So this is going to be the default route to our old API. And then we got to basically say, which VPC do we want to associate, and then what's the URL that we're going to point to. And so this could be anything. It could be, can it be a non-AWS URL?
Yeah, so you could hit a public URL and we'll route it over the public internet. You can hit an HTTP or HTTPS URL in a VPC. And you have a lot of flexibility of what you can hit. You can also, of course, alternatively, you can pick a Lambda, which I think you're gonna show next.
Yep, exactly. So I just added that default endpoint, which is our Java Tomcat monolith here, or it's not Tomcat, Java monolith. And I did that check mark at the bottom and said this is a default route, and I create service. So now I have my legacy service in here, And it creates the route automatically after you create the service, right? Which is really nice. So I can go see my route, source path of slash, child path, all verbs. And so these verbs are like get, post. These are the different HTTP methods that are going to be in our API gateway.
Yeah, and that's an important note. Often we get asked what types of apps is Refactor Spaces good for? And from a technical perspective, the main question is the app's interface currently exposed or will be exposed via HTTP or REST-based interfaces? So because we use API Gateway for the proxy, that path-based routing and HTTP or REST-based APIs are the primary technical requirement for applications to be refactored with Refactor Spaces.
Nice. So now that we have the /proxy, essentially if we go into this API gateway URL, everything should be exactly the same as if we went through that EC2 URL. So we're going to try that out. We're going to go find the URL, which we find in the stages, I believe. And so at this point, if we try the /unicorns of our API gateway, I should be routing it to our legacy app, and everything should work exactly the same. So I pull this URL here. It's the one that starts with the ZHD. I open a new tab discreetly so you can't see my Chrome history here. So now we have the ZHD /unicorns, and everything is showing exactly the same as my EC2 was. So this is essentially proxying everything to my legacy for me. But now we get to the fun part, is where we can start breaking down the monolith. Now that we have everything else going to our legacy, we can start picking apart services one at a time. So the first thing you said was shopping cart, right?
Yeah. And so I think the other important note too, while you were there, is you're showing the API Gateway console. And so that API Gateway is in your account. Within Refactor Spaces, when you use our APIs or CloudFormation, we provide you the resource IDs for API Gateway and Transit Gateway, so you can then go do other things that we don't currently orchestrate. Obviously, there's some limits to that, like what would break what we do. We don't prevent you from doing those things, but it just means we can't manage that resource anymore. It might be in an error state, but you can continue to use it. So you have a lot of flexibility over how you implement each increment as you refactor it.
That's a great point. A good example is you almost always have to enable cores on your API gateway and then redeploy it. And that's something you could do independently of this on a different route.
Yeah, and that's actually a good call out, Jonah, too. We're starting this journey of helping with incremental refactoring, and so we want to hear from you, our customers, of what would be most helpful. So if you're always turning on cores and you're like, I want Refactor Spaces to do that for me, we'd love to hear that type of feedback.
Awesome. So now we're in our secondary account, and this is the green one. And now we built some lambdas to do our cart functionality, and so these are existing in this account now. And I'm going to add these to Refactor Spaces. And we're going to start redirecting all that traffic from the front end if it hits that certain path to our lambdas instead. So we're going to go create our application. So this is our post, which is the adding a unicorn to the basket. So it had that message in the beginning that said added unicorn to basket in the developer tab, which I don't know if anyone else caught, but I've seen this 10 times. So I find the lambda I want to add. And again, you can, instead of adding a lambda, you can also use a URL, like if you're using like Fargate and an ALB. And I believe down here, you're going to give the path. And so if you come in as a client on a certain path, it's going to redirect to the API gateway, which will then hit Refactor Spaces, right?
Yeah, so you hit that, well, you hit the API gateway, we configure the path on that API, we configure VPC link to the NLB and we configure a target group on the NLB if it's a URL in a VPC. If it's a Lambda though, we don't go through NLB. With Lambda, we orchestrate API Gateway's Lambda integration directly, and the resource policies on that Lambda to permit the API Gateway to make the call to the Lambda cross account.
Which is a lot of really complicated stuff to do manually, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, but I think the other important note though, Jonah, is we're also not hiding it from you, not because we don't want you to learn it, but so that you can try and experiment things very quickly without having to learn that. And then of course you're going to own and operate this infrastructure. You're going to own and operate what we're helping make easier. And so you will ultimately learn how to use many of these things over time and get some more flexibility.
You have a way with words, Michael. So now we have our service and our green account, and it's our add unicorn to basket. And again, it creates our route for us. So this is our post with the /unicorn/basket, and it's going to the Lambda. But again, because these are shared between the two, I should be able to see this in the main account, right?
Yes. So if you want to see the visibility of all your routes, all your services, and all your applications for an environment, you can do that from the environment owner's account. And remember, an account can own environments and be part of them. But when you're in an account that it's simply shared with and is not the environment owner, there's less visibility you have, but you can still do key things. Like you can create your services independently. You don't have to go to the environment owner to do that. You can route traffic independently. Now, you should probably have a conversation with teams if you're going to move traffic over in any migration, even when you're refactoring. And all that can be controlled too via IAM. So if that's not a behavior you like, we have robust IAM controls that you can apply to restrict what a non-environment owner can do.
Exactly. So in this refactor, we added a DynamoDB table. So if I add a unicorn to cart, it's going to add this to here. So this might help me filter out any old unicorns in my old database that aren't actually being used on the store. This is part of the workshop for this refactor spaces. If you end up going through this yourself, you will find that you do a little bit more with the DynamoDB here. So I'm now back in my main account here, and I refresh, and I do see that route. Unicorn baskets, target service, and we just highlighted there. I can rewind if needed, but when we took a look at the other account, we see that the account is the 778, and so we kind of have that single pane of glass, right, from our main account here. And if I was managing, 10 accounts, I could kind of see where each one was going, which would be useful.
And that's sort of the view that you don't get today when you're breaking these things up across account. Is that single place to go see what's going on, what's routing where, and what's the network look like.
Exactly. So now I'm going back to this API gateway, and again, as Refactor Spaces is doing all this work behind the scenes, I'm going to keep refreshing and seeing what is building out for me. And now we're going to actually test and see. So now we can see that if something comes on /unicorn/basket with a post, it's going to go to Refactor Spaces and send it to my Lambda. So we're going to actually try this out in real time. So we're going to go back to our monolith. Behind the scenes, I changed that monolith to now be pointing to the API gateway instead of that EC2 as its backend. So right here, we can see that don't mind the weird errors here, but we can see that the backend is this ZHD instead of the EC2 that I was pointing to. And so what's happening is if it's not coming in on that /unicorn/basket, it's hitting the proxy and going to our legacy app. So that's why everything else still works. It's just that if you come in exactly on the cart post, it's now going to go to our Lambda. So again, is that Strangler Fig?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm just making sure. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to add a unicorn to the basket. Which I swear I hit play. Okay. It's not playing here. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I hit add unicorn to basket. I'm going to hit add cart, and that should kick off our method here. So this is a Lambda, and Lambdas have a cold start because this is the first time running this. So it's taking, a good 5 seconds. But I'm going to run it again after just to show you that the next time it does go faster, right? So we see added unicorn to basket worked. And I ran it a second time, and it went really fast this time. But our Git is not working on the cart. So that's going to be the next thing we'll do, is this cart is not updating, so we need to refactor the Git cart method as well. Which I think I'll do next. So I'm just showing that it's the same message that we saw in that beginning, which is the add a unicorn to basket. And then I think I switch over to it here in a second. So for refactor spaces, when you create services and everything, do you have to create them in the same account that those resources are living? Is that the intended goal there for them?
Yeah, so you would, from an IAM, like a permissions perspective, you would need to be in the account where the resource is to create the service and path to it. Okay. Well, the service to it. The environment owner can create paths once the service is created because it's been shared with everything we talked about is contained in the environment. So It's an environment with an application, and the application has services and routes. And so once you share the environment, those other things, now the other accounts, the environment owner and the other accounts have a trust relationship.
Okay. That makes sense. But the API gateway is always going to live in the main account where you're launching.
Actually, that's the recommended approach. You could put the application you can have multiple applications in an environment, and you could put them in different accounts.
Okay.
So there's different topologies. Today we don't isolate the applications in the environment, so it's still an open bridge. But there are use cases where you would need multiple proxies, depending on how complex your legacy application might be, and so we support that today.
Awesome. Okay, good to know. So now I'm back in the green account, and we need to fix that get cart service because our cart was at 0 there. So we're going to do the same thing. I've conveniently made the Lambda ahead of time in this account. So we're just going to add it. So it's our get cart service. We're going to do the Lambda. I could find it. And then we're going to come in at the same path, which is that /unicorn/basket. But the nice thing here is that we can do the different HTTP methods, right? And so this will configure a new thing in API Gateway. So if you come in with a get, it will now direct it because our application was confused because we only had the post there. So we can refresh now. And same thing, we see it with the get basket in the basket. So hopefully, fingers crossed, if we come back to our application here, or we're going to go look at it in the main account, I guess, just to double check everything's looking good. So we have these hyperlinks here, Michael. Do you know if we click on these, will it open it up in the second account for us?
It won't open it in the second account. It'll take you to the service in whatever account you're viewing it in.
Okay, awesome. That makes sense. So we're going to go look at our API Gateway. We refresh. We see the get now lives there. You do have the ability, because it's a fully, you own API Gateway, to test things in API Gateway. So I just ran a retrieve on a 1 just to double check it's working, and I can see I'm pulling a unicorn. So this was that /unicorns earlier. We saw that big list. I just retrieved the UID 1, saw I got a unicorn. It's looking good. Hopefully the front end is showing it. So it's a little zoomed in here because I had to go incognito because I was having some session and cookie issues. But we do see right when we log in that the card is at 3, which is a good sign. So at this point, we should add, so I refresh the page just to make sure everything's looking good. We should add one to the cart here. It's a little zoomed in, I know. So I just went and added a random one here, a new one, incremented up to 4. And so this is incognito, so no sessions, everything is rolling on that new API gateway. And so that's how quickly we're able to refactor this cart service on our monolith. And so we can actually go see everything and make sure it's working as intended. So we go in the second account and we can go look at our Lambda logs really fast. So we're just going to pull them up and double check that things are actually hitting this Lambda as intended, and it's not just some UI bug or it's not hitting the monolith. So we can see all these invocations because every time I refresh or add a unicorn, it's hitting that Lambda for me. And so this is showing that, in fact, on that UI, everything is being routed to that second account through refactor spaces like magic. And that is our demo.
Thank you. All right, we'll appreciate it, Jonah. What we'll do is I'm going to just a few quick extra notes here to wrap up, and then there we go. And then we'll have a few minutes for questions, and I think we'll there's several of us here who can answer questions outside too. So we're excited today to launch this. But Refactor Spaces is a preview. If I didn't mention that before, I just wanted to mention it's a public preview. There's no sign up. You just go to Migration Hub and use it. We're also very excited that we have 6 partners who can help you accelerate your application refactor projects with us today, starting with us today. So Deloitte, Catalent, ThoughtWorks, vFunction, Virtusa, and Wipro. So pricing. In the preview, there is no charge during the preview period for refactor spaces. And once the preview period is over and the feature is generally available, there'll be charges on, and these are all published now on the Migration Hub pricing page, the details of this. You'll be charged for environment hours and for API requests to the refactor spaces service APIs, not your applications API calls, but to if you ask us for, describe the environment. Both the API requests come with a free tier that's every month, and there's a 90-day trial once we're generally available on 3 environments for 3 months, the equivalent of that in hours. And again, more details is on our pricing page. So we are launching today in 10 regions, and this actually expands the Migration Hub region list by 3, I believe. So the Migration Hub now has features in 10 regions, and so you can access it via the AWS console and use the region picker to switch to whatever region you'd like to use it in. The other important note is if you've used the Migration Hub before, many of the features to date had used a feature called Home Region, which keeps all your data in a single region, which is important for migration projects outside of AWS. But because we're an infrastructure orchestrator, we mirror just like the infrastructure that we orchestrate. The region you use refactor spaces in is the region we keep your data in. So if you use it in US East Virginia, that's where everything will be. So get started today. Go create your first refactor environment and start incrementally refactoring your applications. Really appreciate the time. We have about 3 minutes for some Q&A, and then like I said, we'll be available afterwards too. Any questions I can start answering now? Yes. Latency overhead. Great question. So there's two latency considerations. The first is the environment's cross-account bridge. We're using Transit Gateway. Transit Gateway's published latency is under a millisecond between accounts in the same region. And on the API, the application and the proxy we provide with API Gateway and NLB, it's going to vary, but usually that's somewhere between 20 and 30 milliseconds for all 3 of those: VPC Link, API Gateway, and NLB. Yes. Yes, you could get creative and do blue-green directly with refactor spaces, or you could use the underlying services for it. But that's something we're thinking very carefully about, blue-green and traffic weighting, because obviously they're kind of top of mind when it comes to important deployment safety patterns when doing these types of changes. Other questions? Is there integration with Cloud Control or CloudFormation? Yeah, there's integration today with CloudFormation. I need to get back to you on Cloud Control because I need to find out what route we go to get supported in that. It may actually be supported, but it's relatively new. If I'm thinking of the right thing. Yeah, there's no Terraform support today, but we'll be working with Terraform to get it supported. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I want to say on behalf of Belinda and Jonah and myself, we really appreciate the time. And like I said, we'll be available if you'd like to talk more outside. And want to thank you. And as always, I think you have please complete the survey. We really value your feedback. So we want to hear what you thought of the session, and go try refactor spaces. And one other note, didn't have the slide in there, just wanted to mention it. If you want to get hands-on, there's a workshop to ENT 302 where you'll be basically doing hands-on the demo that Jonah shared. And then if you want to dive deeper into into domain-driven design. ENT 401 will be on domain-driven design and refactor spaces. You'll see probably a similar demo there, but the content will go more into domain-driven design. And then ENT 402, if you want to learn more about multi-account setups, especially with Control Tower, and how you can use that and put that into action when doing refactoring with refactor spaces. And there too, you'll see probably a similar demo at the end, but the content of those sessions will be much more deeper into those two subjects. So 401 for domain-driven design and refactor spaces, and 402 for Control Tower, multi-account layouts, and refactor spaces and incremental refactoring. So thanks again, and have a great rest of your reInvent.